Hey folks, welcome back to mographplus.com. In this lesson, which is an update for developing realistic shaders in C42A courses, I'll be trying to create Iron Man shaders. So we'll be focusing on two main shaders. First of all, this golden part and this red part here. These are metals basically, and we'll be trying to recreate them as accurately as possible within our time frame that we have. We start with this golden part, and if you watch the movie, you can basically see the suit through different stages, from being very clean to being very damaged and nasty. And this is the particular image that I have. Obviously, this is a screenshot from the movie, and it can be in a great shape. Whatever I do, there is motion blur, and this is a screenshot, so we don't see any great detail here. So we need to make up some of the detail on our own and try to make it as realistic and believable as possible. So we start with this golden part, and after we create a few versions of this, we start making this red part, and then we go inside After Effects for some color correction and compositing to make our final shaders look better. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So this is the scene that I have here, which is the shader ball scene from masteringcgi.com. Fortunately, I can actually provide the scene file, as I spoke with Grant Warwick at masteringcgi.com, and he allowed me to share the files with you guys. So you can download the scene file for this particular lesson. So when you download the tutorial, you can find the project files for this lesson included, which include the shader ball scene here. Now, if I get out of the camera, you can see we have a very basic scene of shader ball, this floor, this area light here, and this Arnold sky here. And the HDR image that I'm using for my Arnold sky, as you can see, is this image. So if you go to hdrlabs.com/sib/archive.html, you got this new port.love. This is the image that I'm actually using it in the scene. So you can go ahead and click on it and download it, and replace the HDR image that you find there in this particular shader network. So just open it up, and you can see, just replace that new port loft and add it here. Okay, and I have a simple color correction node applied to this image, and as you can see, just making the image to be less saturated. So the saturation is about 0.6. Great. So let's get started, and let me just get back to the camera. Also, I have some AOVs here in the scene. So if you go to your AOVs, you can see I have my direct diffuse, direct specular, indirect diffuse, and indirect specular, just in case we need to use them. Okay, and you can see that's the display driver here. Perfect. So let's get started by creating a new standard shader, and let's name it gold, and apply it to our shader ball here. And as you can see, the shader ball has different materials and shaders applied to that. You can find them here. Okay, great. So let's open it up, and I can run the IPR here. First of all, we don't have any diffuse contribution, and for the specular color, for the time being, I'm going to simply use this color. Okay, we are going to be controlling specular weight and roughness, obviously, with some maps and layers, but for the time being, I'm just going to increase this, maybe go to something like obviously GGX, use for now. And for the refraction value, as we are trying to recreate something damaged, if I can, as we are trying to recreate something, damaged, and as you can see, it's not that shiny, we don't have to go that high on our IR value. So I can simply use something like maybe 15 And if I turn on Fresnel use IOR, that's better. I think I used exactly 16, so let's use that. So that's our basic shader. Let me just maybe go to something like 0.2, and I'm just going to let my IPR go, and after it's finished I'll be back to talk about the specular color, specular weight, and specular roughness, and adjust those to get our final shader. Okay, so that's what we have. Now what we're going to be doing is to use specular color to actually add some of these brighter and darker parts. So I mean, the way normally I would approach such a shader is to use you know, maybe a few standard shaders and combine them using the layer color node. But in this particular example, I'll be using only one standard shader and try to create the same effect by using maps to control specular color, weight, and roughness. So let's start with the specular color here. I'm going to open the network here, and also I can run the IPR. Perfect. So let's start with a layer color here, and that's going to control the specular weight, specular color, sorry. Okay, for the first layer we're going to be using the same color that we used in our specular color when we were creating the basic shader, so this yellowish color. Okay, so we have the same result that we had before. Let me just space here. There we go. Now for the second layer, let me load an image node here, and the image that we're going to be using is maybe something like this. Okay, let me first of all press Ctrl Shift V and connect it and see what we're going to have. Let me increase the scale on this, maybe do something like 5 and 5. Okay. And this can be our second layer. So layer 2. Obviously, if we connect our standard shader right now, we only see our first layer, but if I increase this, you can see we start to see our layer 2 controlling our specular color, right? I don't want these parts to be very dark, as you can see. So what I can do is to simply use a RAM float color, RAM float node, and insert it after, and maybe use something like 0.2 as my darkest values. Okay. Now we need to basically control the layer 2 alpha, so it will combine with our first layer, which is this gold color, right? So let's start doing that. Okay. Again, load another image node here, and this time I'm going to be using I'm going to be using this. As you can see, this is a map I've prepared. There's some scratches and dents in here, so let's load this one. So let me connect this and see what we're going to get. Let's increase the scales to maybe 3 and 3. Okay, I think that's great, but I think it wouldn't be bad if we actually used a UV transform node after this, and as a path through, just trying to rotate it a tad, maybe something like this. Okay. And I just want to increase the exposure on this one a bit. So let's use a color correction. Insert after input. And let me just increase the exposure a bit. Maybe that's too much. Something like 0.2 will work just fine. And now if I connect this to my layer 2 alpha, you should be able to see that now we have this as our specular color basically. And if I connect the standard shader directly to the root, you can see we get these results. You can see some damages. Some of these parts are showing through our gold section of the material. Now I want to add another layer to this map that controls our layer 2 alpha. So let me load another layer color here and use this as our first layer and connect this as our layer 2 alpha. Okay. For the second layer, I'm going to be using a very simple curvature shader, so we can show some of these white and dark parts on these convex areas of our shader ball. So if I connect the curvature shader directly, this is what you're going to get by default. I'm going to change the output. Output should be convex actually. So I'm going to increase the samples and decrease the radius, maybe to something like 0.05. Okay. And the spread maybe to something like 0.95. Also, I'm going to increase the threshold maybe to something like 0.8. Okay. And also increase the multiply to something like 2. Right. Now this curvature shader is going to be used as our layer 2. And if I connect this layer color directly, this is what you're going to have. For the second layer, let me increase its alpha and change its mode, its blending mode to something like lighten. Now we get both the image here, which is this one, and the curvature shader in this layer color node, and we're going to be using this as our layer 2 alpha. So the resulting specular color map will be something like this, right? Great. Let me just maybe clean up some of these areas, something like this, and connect the standard shader, and let's see what you're going to get in the IPR. Okay folks, so this is our IPR, and now we need to start working on our specular weight and our specular roughness. And as we do so, we need to make sure to make these brighter and darker parts a bit different compared to our golden base here. And we need, for example, to make them a bit rougher, just to set them apart from the base. I mean, these are details that unfortunately we can't see in this image because of the low quality image that we have here, but I think that would help a lot, right? So let's start controlling our specular weight and our specular roughness. So I'm going to be using another image here, and in this case maybe something with some high frequency detail like this can help. And if I run the IPR and connect this, so there we go. I'm just going to increase scale U and V to something like 2, so we get even more detail here. And now if I connect this directly to my specular weight, I don't think we're gonna get any lovely results. So let me just have a ramp float in between. Okay, and connect that to our specular weight here. There we go. Let's just maybe focus on this part here and connect our standard shader. So this is what we're going to get by default. Obviously this is not what we want, so what I can do for starters is to invert the image. Now that's better. As you can see from the IPR, we get some very dark spots and some very shiny reflections in some other areas. So just going to select this and go to something like maybe 0.1 and maybe something like this for our darkest values. And let me just, I think we use something like 0.5 in our specular weight when we're using a plain number. So let me just decrease this value a tad here. Okay. Maybe to something like there we go. Now we get more detail on the specular weight also. Great. Now for the specular roughness, what I did, so that's our specular weight, and now we need to work on our specular roughness. First of all, I'm going to be using a layer color node, and that is going to be controlling our specular roughness here. And as it is black, our first layer is black, so we're going to get a very sharp speculars on our shader. So use an image node here, and I'm going to be using BW maybe 38, and as always a ramp float, insert after input, and let me see how this image is going to appear on the, okay, that's good. And that's going to be our first layer for our specular roughness map. Right. And if I enable the region again, as you can see, it's so rough, obviously because the image is too bright. So in the ramp float here, what I can do is to first of all invert the image to get a bit more reasonable result. So now we have a map like this. Great. Now for the very rough areas, maybe we can go to a value of something like 0.5, and for the sharpest areas, maybe something like 0.1. So that's better. And if I connect this, this is the basic result that you're going to have. As you can see, we add so many detail to our shader. Now I want these bright and darker areas that we added in our specular color map, these brighter and darker areas compared to our golden base, to be also a bit rougher compared to it. So what we can do is simply select a color, maybe like let's see, something like this. Okay, And if I press OK, now if I increase if I come here to my standard shader, and if I increase the layer 2, you can see we're going to get a very rough result compared to the base that we have here. Now for layer 2 alpha, I can simply use the same layer color node that we use to control our layer 2 alpha of our specular color map. So simply, this is the map, right, which is a combination of this image and this curvature shader, and we are going to be using it simply to control our layer 2 alpha of our specular roughness map, right? And now we're going to be seeing a result like this. If I take a look at this, there you go. And now I can connect my standard shader, and let's wait for the IPR and see what we are going to get. Okay. So here is the result, and I think the specular weights, maybe the contrast is a bit too much. Maybe we can use actually another map here. So if I just open up my network here, I'll go to the specular weights map, and maybe let's use something like this instead of this one that we used the previous time. So let's use this one, and if let's just connect this directly and see what we're going to get. I mean, this result that we have here right now can be nice if you are going for a bit more damaged version, but I think for what I'm looking for, it's just a bit too much. So that's the map here. If I connect the standard shader, as you can see, it's not that dirty that we had before. Okay, so that's good. Now for the bump mapping, what I'm going to be doing obviously is going to be using a simple bump and use the standard shader as our shader, and for the bump map I'm going to be using maybe something like this, and if I connect this directly, maybe increase the scale and use it as the bump map here. Now to see exactly how the bump mapping is going to affect our shader, what I'm going to do is to stop the IPR, increase the resolution to something like 2000 and 2000 pixel, and run the IPR again, and now focus on this area so you can see how it's going to affect our shader. So if I connect the bump map directly, you should be able to see. Right now obviously it's too much, so let's go to something like maybe 0.1 and see what we are going to get. As you can see from the IPR, that's way too much, so let's go to 0.05. I think it's still too much for my taste, so let's go to 0.02. maybe 0.01. Let me just increase this a tad, maybe 0.012 here. As you can see now, we have a bit more detail on the shader using the bump map, and I think this first shader is finished, and I can get back to the smaller resolution and see what we're going to get. And as we have always been doing it, I will be rendering this shader in a higher quality resolution and setting at the end of this lesson, so we can appreciate all the detail. But for the time being, I'm just going to render this small section, and when it's done, I'll be back and create a few other versions of what we have here. Okay folks, so this is our first IPR render, and if you compare it to what we have here, I think it's very close. Maybe we can make it a bit more damage, but it's up to you. You can use a bit easier map to control the layer alpha, but I think it's very close. Maybe it's a bit more saturated compared to what we have here. Obviously the environment is different and the lighting is different, and that can affect the way you see the shader a lot, but we can control that in After Effects or in Photoshop and make it a bit more desaturated compared to what we have here. Now one thing I'm gonna do right now is to actually right click on this and go to my add an object mask to this guy, so we can have a bit more control over it in After Effects. And let's name this, I don't know, shader ball and mask maybe. If I go to my AOVs here, custom shader ball, press OK, there you have it. Also, I think there is an older version here. Let me press OK. Great. Now let me create another version of what we have here. Maybe use a bit easier pattern to control the layer alpha of our specular color and also of our roughness map. Thanks for watching this video tutorial. It was a free sample from our course Developing Realistic Shaders in Arnold for Cinema 4D Volume 2. To watch the rest of this lesson and tons of other video tutorials, make sure to visit our website mographplus.com and check the entire course out. Also, don't forget to check the first volume of this course. See you next time.